Starting with a young boy named Greg Garrett on the night of April 25th, 1973, sightings and encounters with a strange, horrifying beast shook the small town of Enfield in Illinois and sent it into a frenzy. This cryptid, one of many unidentified cryptids, is by far one of the strangest and most terrifying. In this video, I will explore these events in detail so you can decide for yourself. What was the Enfield horror? Like and subscribe if you like my content. Stay tuned and enjoy. It was April 25th, 1973, a quiet night in the small town of Enfield in Illinois. A young boy named Greg Garrett was playing in his backyard, catching fireflies and looking up at the stars in the night sky. It was as he attempted to catch his next firefly that something happened that would change the town forever. Mr. and Mrs. Garrett had been inside watching television when suddenly Greg burst inside, hysterical and crying. His parents had no idea what was going on. Greg told them what had happened while he was out playing. While Greg had attempted to catch his next firefly, he was attacked by a strange, terrifying creature. It was about 4 or 5 feet tall. It had tiny arms with claws. It was slimy and gray, 3 legs also with claws, and big red eyes the size of flashlights. Greg's tennis shoes were torn to shreds as it ran past him, stepping over his feet. Greg's parents were extremely concerned and weren't sure what had just happened to their son. They knew that Greg was not known for making things up, but his story was crazy, absurd. They weren't sure what to believe and couldn't find a logical explanation for what happened to Greg. The same night, and at the exact moment that was going on in Greg's house, something else was happening in their neighbor's house, the McDaniels' house. Henry McDaniel and his wife were returning home, and when they got back, they found their 2 children in a panic. Their children claimed the thing had tried to break into the house. First, it had tried to get in through the back door before trying again by getting onto a window-mounted air conditioner. Their children were visibly terrified. Something had shaken them just like Greg Garrett next door. As Henry was listening, he began to hear strange sounds from the front door. It sounded like unusual scratching, like an animal at his door. Henry assumed that it was a stray animal at his door, but when he opened it, he saw something that would change his life forever. He was face to face with the Enfield horror. He slammed the door in an instant, horrified, and grabbed a flashlight and a .22 pistol. He threw the back door open and shined his light out and caught another glimpse at the creature. It was a horrifying, terrifying creature, similar to how Greg Garrett had described it. Henry McDaniel opened fire on the creature, again and again, but the bullets seemed to have no dangerous effect on it. He claimed it hissed like a wildcat before jumping away, covering 75 feet in approximately 3 hops, and then it was gone, disappearing past the railroad tracks. McDaniel called the local police, but instead the Illinois state troopers showed up at his door. They did a search of the area, but could find no signs of the Enfield horror. However, they did find strange scratch marks against the sliding. They appeared to be fresh. They also found 3 footprints, each with long claw marks. 2 of the footprints were about 4 feet wide, with the third one being slightly smaller. The troopers were puzzled, claiming that nothing they saw during the search could have explained the strange and bizarre footprints. On May 6th, in the dead of night, McDaniel was startled awake by the sound of neighborhood dogs howling. He pulled himself out of bed and grabbed his gun, then made his way out the front door. The Enfield horror had returned. Upon opening, he claimed to have gotten a better look at the monster from a distance. This time it wasn't in a hurry, it was just making its way slowly down the railroad tracks. In the days that followed after the story, McDaniel felt compelled to tell everyone what he had seen. He wanted the world to know about this. Before long, news trucks, scientists, curiosity seekers, and monster hunters arrived to Enfield, wanting to see the alleged monster for themselves and find out what was going on. At one point, the town became so filled with frenzy over the Enfield horror from outsiders and townspeople alike that the White County Sheriff actually threatened to arrest Henry McDaniel if he didn't stop talking about what he'd seen. At least 5 monster hunters were arrested and deemed a threat to public safety after they had shot at a hairy gray thing. The judge claimed they were simply out to raise hell. One man named Rick Rainbow, who was a news director for WWKI in Kokomo, Indiana, claimed to have his own experience with the Enfield horror. Him and 3 other men claimed to have witnessed it around an abandoned house not far from the McDaniels house. He could not get a clear description of the creature due to it being in the shadows and it having its back turned to them. But he did describe it as being around the same height, same as the other descriptions, and gray too. Rainbow also managed to record the alleged screams of the Enfield horror, but the audio was never released to the general public. Supposedly, those cries were heard over the next several days by Enfield near the railroad tracks next to McDaniel's house. After that night, the Enfield horror jumped over the tracks and left. That was the last known sighting of it in Enfield ever again. Just as quickly as it had arrived, it disappeared, leaving the town never the same again. In 1978, a group of researchers opened a case on the Enfield horror. They wanted to find the truth behind all these stories. Were the encounters true or hoaxed? In conclusion to their research, they found that no more than 3 first-hand witnesses claimed they actually saw the monster. Local news stories and town gossip exaggerated their stories. Every story was passed around and around, details changing and exaggerating and becoming much bigger and elaborate than they actually were. Also, if all these stories were real, how come nobody has any evidence? Did no one take pictures of the footprints or claw marks, or even of the creature itself? Many skeptics believe that it was all an elaborate hoax to bring tourists to the small town of Enfield. But how come it started with just 2 neighbors who had extremely similar experiences and independently reported them to the police without even talking to each other beforehand? The Enfield horror is one of the most terrifying and bizarre cases of cryptids in a small town ever recorded. What was the Enfield horror? We still don't know. It left a small town shaken and with unanswered questions. Over 40 years later, there have been no known reports on it. Has it left Enfield? Or could it still be out there somewhere, lurking? We may never know. Like and subscribe if you like my content, and stay tuned for more.